Hi everyone, welcome to Roaming, your podcast on dance knowledge. Today I'd like to talk about a phenomenon that once seemed almost foreign to hip-hop, but now appears to be spreading like a freaking virus. In German we have a word that's perhaps more precise than any English term that could describe what it is, and it's called Perspektivlosigkeit, which could be translated to a loss of perspective or loss of agency. And that I see more and more appearing in this coming generation. The closest English word I could think of that describes what I want to talk about is maybe hopelessness. Even though back then many of us grew up under tougher conditions than young people face today, it often feels like as though we had a lot more hope. We had a stronger belief that our actions could shape our future, and somehow I feel we were more confident that somehow we would find a way. I can't fully explain why that seems to have changed, but it genuinely scares me. Over the years, I've noticed that this perspectiveless, let's just call it like that this perspectiveless state of mind in countless conversations. There's a restraint, a kind of paralysis, something invisible that seems to keep people from taking action. Eventually, I realized perceived inevitability weakens agency. Okay, I think that we can agree on the fact that hip-hop culture has truly shown the power of the individual, right? As a matter of fact, this is probably one of the strongest lessons that could be drawn from hip-hop culture. Many, if not most people who participated in hip-hop during its formative decade lacked access to resources that are commonly assumed to be necessary for success in any artistic fields. So let me give you some examples here. There was no formal education in the arts, there's no institutional support, there was no funding, there was no professional training, and certainly no cultural legitimacy. Yet hip-hoppers still created new art forms, new styles, new events, new businesses, created careers out of something most people called utopic, and eventually built global cultural movements. If there is one thing that hip-hoppers have consistently demonstrated, it is that individuals can exert a remarkable influence over their circumstances, even when structural constraints are real. Most of the times, people only reference hip-hoppers from the first generation in the Bronx. And I think that's a mistake, because of course, it also happened in the years to come, and then also all over the world. We don't need to look at the first DJs, rappers, graffiti writers, beatboxers, breakers or party organizers, and also not only at people that were directly involved with the arts. No, wherever we look, we find people in hip-hop who brought themselves together and created, built and flourished against the odds. Most importantly, back then, at least in my circles, the question was never, what resources do I have? Or who's going to support me? Instead it was, what can I do with what is available? Why does this matter for agency? When I say perceived inevitability weakens agency, I'm referring to a very important psychological phenomenon here. If people perceive outcomes as fixed or believe they are determined entirely by external forces, the motivation to act, experiment, and take initiative begins to decline. Okay, to what I experienced, hip-hop cultivated the opposite mindset. In fact, it produced it. We were surrounded by living examples of people who achieved what really seemed impossible at that time. It was their success that mainly expanded our sense of what was possible for ourselves. So I'm saying one reason hip-hop spread globally may be that it provided a highly visible demonstration of personal efficacy. People around the world could observe individuals with very limited resources producing something valuable, respected and culturally influential. So we never waited for ideal conditions. It was about discovering possibilities through action, creating and doing by trying. I don't suggest that structural barriers are unimportant. They are real and they matter. But hip-hop consistently shifted attention away from what could not be controlled towards what could. I see that shift as one of the culture's greatest psychological strengths, actually. Here's a useful distinction though. There's a difference between denying constraints and refusing to treat constraints as destiny. Hip-hop was often strongest when it embodied the second position. The implicit message was, you may not control your starting position, but you can still become a significant causal force in your own development. That is not a claim that individuals are omnipotent. It is a claim that human agency is often much larger and stronger than people initially assume. Hip-hop culture repeatedly supplied concrete examples of that principle in practice. But there's another reason hip-hop strengthened agency. It did not merely produce successful individuals, it repeatedly destroyed assumptions about what was possible. Again and again, hip-hop challenged things that many people considered fixed, impossible, or simply the way things are. Now honestly, who would have imagined turntables could become instruments? Who would have believed that speaking rhythmically over music would become one of the world's dominant musical forms? Who would have expected names written on walls and trains would evolve into one of the most influential visual arts movements? Who would have thought that one day breaking would be performed on the stages of the most prestigious theaters like Théâtre Chaillot in France or Kennedy and Lincoln Center in the US? Who would have imagined that more than 10,000 people would fill an arena to watch the International Battle of the Year finals? Who would have believed that breaking would become part of the Olympic Games, or that battles like Beyond Doubt would award €100,000 in prize money for the winners? Hip-hop transformed what many dismissed as impossible into reality. Every breakthrough expanded the boundaries of what people believed could be achieved. And yes, it was always a relatively small number of highly committed individuals who exerted a disproportionate influence over the larger community. There's always been an asymmetry of initiative, but the broader sentiment surrounding action feels fundamentally different today. Back then, the question was rarely whether something was possible or not. The question was simply, who would be the first to try? So, failure was expected and experimentation was the key. The possibility that something had never been done before was often, if not mainly, seen as an invitation, rather than a reason to hesitate. Each of these developments represented more than artistic innovation. They were demonstrations that accepted limitations could be questioned, and sometimes completely overturned. In this sense, hip-hop became a continuous process of creative destruction. Existing assumptions were dismantled, not for the sake of destruction itself, of course, but to make room for possibilities that had previously seemed unimaginable. Every breakthrough carried the same implicit message. If this is possible, what else might be possible? That question extends far beyond music, dance, graffiti, or DJing. It truly reshapes a person's relationship to uncertainty. At least for me, it's like, instead of seeing the unknown as evidence that something cannot be done, it becomes like an invitation to experiment to show it could work. Nobody thought sampling becomes composition. Breakers like me have shown they can have a professional career. Graffiti entered in galleries and museums. Beatboxing replaces instruments. Nobody thought streetwear could become luxury fashion. Local crews can become international organizations, and for sure here, nobody thought kids from marginalized neighborhoods could become entrepreneurs, educators, professors, and cultural ambassadors. Nobody even thought people from different cultures and nationalities can live, work, and have fun together. One of hip-hop's most remarkable achievements is that it developed a practical model for transforming cultural difference into cooperation. Rather than demanding sameness, it created unity through cultural convergence. So please, notice that every example reinforces the same psychological lesson. The range of the possible is wider than conventional wisdom suggests. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it is a renewed confidence in your own capacity to act. History is rarely changed by those who wait until the conditions are perfect. More often it is shaped by those who decide to take the first step, despite the uncertainty. None of us knows what becomes possible until we begin to act. That uncertainty is not a reason to hesitate. It is precisely where new possibilities emerge. Remember in the beginning of the video when I said perceived inevitability weakens agency? Now believe less in inevitability and more in your own ability to shape what could come next. Have a great day. Peace. Storm.